Hi, everyone. My name is Joyce Raimondo, and I am the Education Coordinator at the Pollock Krasner House and Study Center. And this program is hosted jointly with the New York Artists Circle. And I'm wearing two hats today. I am hosting the program on behalf of the museum as the Education Coordinator, and I am also a participating artist in the exhibition Scribble, the Art of Emerging, which is on view right now in New York City. So we're going to do this program basically in three parts. I am going to introduce the theme of automatic drawing as it pertains to Pollock and Krasner and modern art briefly. And then I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful curator, Lois Bender. She has a beautiful presentation about the topic, and then we'll hear from some of the artists in the exhibition. Okay. So the exhibition Scribbles, The Art of Emerging is at Art at First, which is at the Presbyterian Church in Manhattan. It was curated by Lois Bender and assistant curators Stacy Bogdanoff and Lori Bennett Levy. And as I said, it's currently on view for, until actually, it is up until April 24th. So if you're in Manhattan, you can have an opportunity to see it. And the Presbyterian Church itself is magnificent. And we will have a public reception on April 13th from 12 to 4. Now, this exhibition was not curated in conjunction with the Pollock Krasner House and Study Center. The Zoom program itself is. And it is such a relevant theme, the idea of emerging, when it pertains to Pollock and Krasner and the abstract artist. But let's start off. What is the definition of a scribble? A piece of writing or a drawing that is done quickly or carelessly. Scribble drawing is a method that uses random, uncontrolled lines to create patterns and textures. Technically, the term scribble it's completely random. But what we're going to see in art, in modern art, is that there are degrees of randomness. There's degrees of a flow, of a lack of control. And I'll explain to you what that means as we go along. So this is the Barn Studio where Pollock made his famous drip painting. You can come and visit in the spring. Go to pkhouse.org to see what our hours are. And we also offer many Zoom programs such as this one. You can email me, joyce@imaginearted.com, if you'd like to be on our list. So Pollock, of course, is the iconic artist doing drip painting. And there's Lee Krasner. They're both action painters. They're using their entire body when they're painting. And they are doing this groundbreaking abstract expressionist art. So Pollock is dripping paint from sticks, house paint. He's not even touching the canvas. He's working from above. He places the canvas on the floor so he can work from all four sides. And also gravity, of course, pulls the paint down. So wherever it lands, it stays. Now, one might think that Pollock is just doing this very randomly, but that's not the case. That's really a misconception. With Pollock and Lee, it's the idea of improvisation, strongly influenced by jazz. The idea that you are surrendering to the process of art, right? Pollock says, I let the painting lead. So they don't have a preconceived idea. They're not copying a sketch. One mark leads to the next, but they're actually painting very slowly and methodically and with enormous skill. So when we think about sort of going with the flow, there's different degrees here. Pollock's paintings are filled with pattern, texture, line. And when you look at the paintings, they're actually very cohesive in the terms of the composition. You could also see in this one, all the energy is contained with that little bit of space around the rectangle. Now, Lee, like Pollock, is also letting the painting lead. She says you take a deep breath and hope for the best and get into it. And sometimes, as I say, it comes through miraculously. So this idea is very important to Lee, the idea of surrender. She says it comes through. What comes through? What does she mean by that? Her energy is coming through, her subconscious, her imagination, her emotions, her movement, right? But she's not thinking about it, right? She's not planning it. This is her famous portrait in green. This is Sun Woman 1, actually, done shortly after Pollock's death. She says, don't will it, not necessarily about this painting, but one of her famous quotes, don't will it, don't force it, let it come through in its own terms. Now, where did they come up with this idea? Well, Pollock and Krasner and the abstract expressionists were influenced by the other modern artists who came before them, in particular the surrealist artists. So this is an automatic drawing. Now, the surrealists, they would actually create techniques which were completely random, right? That had no control. For example, puncturing a can of paint, putting a hole in it and swinging it. And the artist is completely has no control. That's not this piece, that's another piece by a different artist. Or doing a crayon rubbing and not even knowing what that texture is going to look like. But why were they so interested in this idea of automatic drawing? We all know that we tend to think the same thoughts over and over again, don't we? We tend to let our rational mind take over. The surrealists were interested in the unconscious mind, even the irrational. But how do you get to that? How do you bypass the rational mind, right? Or your everyday waking mind that's dictated sometimes also by the constructs of society. So, and convention. So that is why they devise these techniques to bypass the rational and delve into the subconscious. And you don't know what's going to come out. Salvador Dali says if you understand a painting beforehand, you might as well not paint it. And Andre Masson, this is another example of automatic drawing. He says, all my life I've learned for a thing I cannot name, right? When we name things, it's our analytical mind naming things. That's a shoe, that's a this. But the surrealists wanted you to take a fresh look at things as if you've never seen them before, right? Also, there's automatic writing as well. Pablo Picasso, he also did automatic drawing. This particular one was made for his lover at the time. But you could see there's also an element of play in this, right? You might say it's even a little bit like a doodle. And we all know, when you doodle, you don't even realize you're doodling. And then you look down and you're like, well, wait, what's that? So Picasso says, I don't know in advance what I'm going to put on the canvas. Whilst I work, I take no stock of what I am painting on the canvas. It's only later that I begin to evaluate more exactly the result of my work. Pollock also says, when I am in my painting, I'm not aware of what I'm doing. It is only after a sort of get acquainted period that I see what I've been about. And so you could call it, you're like in the zone. You're one with the painting, right? You're not analyzing, you're not thinking. It's like a great musician, right? Or if you've ever learned to play an instrument, there's that point where you could just play spontaneously without thinking about it. Same with dance, and I'm sure with sports as well. So that quote was taken from this exhibition, which was curated by Pepe Carmel and the former director, Helen Harrison. Now, Lee and Pollock both sought psychotherapy, and this idea of automatic drawing or painting was used as a tool in psychiatry to access the inner life, because the key to healing is understanding your subconscious mind. But again, how do you get to that? So we don't have a firm date on this one, but this is an example of a image painting that Lee would have brought into a psychiatrist to be analyzed. And it's a way even to spark conversation. Pollock also brought drawings into his psychoanalyst. Now, with Pollock, this is not completely automatic. These are pages from his sketchbook, and you see a lot of his influences at this time emerge. You see little figures that look like they would maybe mimic indigenous people. We see images that you might find in Orozco's paintings or Picasso's mask-like figures. So Pollock is synthesizing all this art that he's exposed to, and then it comes out in these drawings. And they were used as a tool for analysis. And so what we see in Pollock's work is he turns away from the observed world and he starts to paint from within. One of his influences, which this was done shortly after taking a workshop with Siqueiros, the Mexican muralist who taught artists in New York to use accidental techniques and unusual materials like dripping and scraping, things like that. Now, Siqueiros wanted the techniques to be completely accidental, but Pollock, on the other hand, said, I can control the flow of paint. So there are subtle differences in these. Now, as Pollock's develop, we see his art becomes much freer, much more painterly, right? We see his mark. We see his movement. We see color is free. We see his gesture, right? And we see on a grand scale his iconic drip painting, which is energy made visible, right? But like I said, it's not completely random. But I think it's something for all of us as artists to think about, how much flows out spontaneously and how deliberate are you, right? And how to maybe just get that spot, which it's just sometimes everything just comes together, right? And you're completely in the moment. So I am going to turn this over now to our wonderful curator, Lois Bender, and she is going to expand on this theme.
So hello, everybody. Thank you, Joyce, for a wonderful talk to introduce us to scribbles and the art of Pollock and Krasner. And this was a lot of fun to curate. I want to thank the New York Artist Circle. And I just have a few slides of also artists that are my favorite scribblers and to help us understand the scribbling that we'll see in our show. And we know that scribbles are more than a language of lines. And mindlessness, which is part of scribbling, is inspired by many prompts of the moment, or memories, observation, the subconscious, or any muses that the artist beckons. But like acrobats, feats of scribbling play, flow, leap, and meet, all emerging from the artist's hands. So I want to show a few thoughts about the artists of the past. One of the great scribblers of all time for me was Frank Gehry, who scribbled his buildings, and they were actually crumpled papers. Before he was making a building, he crumpled the papers and scribbled the art, and it was mind-blowing for me to see the transformation from scribbles into large concepts and large buildings. So he's one of my faves. And as well, Kandinsky, Giacometti, Achille Gorky, and Mata were wonderful scribblers in the early 20th century. Okay, so the scribblers I've looked at are these major 20th century modern masters. And whether it's organic or visual or observation, they are a master at scribble. And here we have late 20th century. We have Basquiat on the upper left with this iconography from his personal life. It's very raw. It's not at all polished. It's just coming from his inner life. And of course, Cy Twombly is a master because he kind of incorporated Semitic writing plus his imagination. And then he was very influenced by the classicism of ancient Greece and Rome. He lived in Italy, and he had this imaginative life that we see in his scribbles. On the bottom, I have another favorite artist, Jean Dubuffet of France. And he's such an imaginative, brilliant artist. And the scribbles just pour out of him, whether it's 3D or 2D. Here's a page of these scribbles. When I was younger, I was working for a framer opposite Sotheby's, and one of the collectors, I dropped off some work to the collector, and in their living room was this gorgeous Dubuffet, and I just was smitten for life. This is a large one. He's kind of an urban graffitiist, and this is all collage work. So one of the wonderful things about scribbling is it's not just a pencil and a line. It's vastly enormous field of all materials. Another artist I love is Saul Steinberg, who was very influential when I was a teenager. I just soaked up his imagination, and he was a brilliant, brilliant artist. Many of you must know the New Yorker magazine, where he portrays New York as 3/4 of the page. But his imagination plus his virtuosity is brilliant with what he came up with. And also now we have scribblers like Jules Pfeiffer, who had dancers in the front. And here we have Alvin Ailey as well. These are images from posters. There was a recent show at the Whitney, and that was a revelation as I watched the words of Alvin Ailey scribbled in dancer formations and acrobatically. Those are wonderful posters. And the center bottom is Al Hirschfeld, who really worked with theater and the sense of the performers. And he always had puzzles and his daughter's name, Nina, written in the scribbling. So that was kind of a sense of uncontrolled and controlled in his cartoon, beautiful drawings. This is my work as a curator. I'll just say that my influence of scribbling started as a teenager. On the lower left is an artwork in the show, and it shows I did this when I was 16, and it just reads Kandinsky everywhere, all over it. It was a lot of fun. I think that having a good experience as an artist in my teenage years, of course, made me want to continue. Next to it is a scribble drawing from the show that's in, which explores this idea of the artist as the scribbler and the ideas coming out of the fingertips. On the right is another drawing based on that. But on the upper left is a drawing of flowers where I'm using scribbles as an idea of an afterthought of a vase of flowers. So scribbling is part of my practice. And I want to introduce the next artist, who's another curator of the show. She assisted me with also Stacy Bogdanovich. This is Lori Bennett Levy, and she'll talk a little bit more later when we show her work. And she wants to talk about the process of finding scribbles, images of scribbling in everyday life that influences her and is a catalyst for her work. So we'll do that later on. And the next artist is another assistant curator, Stacy Bogdanoff. If Stacy can unmute, and she'll talk about how stitching is to textiles as scribbling is to paper. If you can, Stacy, please, thank you so much. Please talk about your work for a moment.
Thank you. Everyone can hear. I'm assuming we're okay. I have really enjoyed helping with this show. I've enjoyed the community, and I've enjoyed seeing the variety of scribbles. And Joyce talked about abstract expressionists, and Lois went to Geary and artists using non-traditional materials. And I've been thinking that one of the reasons this show has been so successful is because there are so many ways to feel and see and encompass scribbles. And, really quickly, my mind went even further back. I mean, I've thought of kind of the first humans to take a stick and scribble in dirt, and take a rock to a cave wall. And I thought of my grandchildren and scratching their backs to calm them down to go to sleep. And we all know the pleasure of scratching an itch, kind of the pain pleasure of that. And most of us have behaved badly and marred some furniture by scratching into it. So I took that and hopscotched to this stitch that I use a lot, which is my form of a scratch and a scribble. And I work with textiles. This particular piece is on vintage curtain lining, which has the line and the scribble of the seam that's been ironed down that dirt has fallen into. The grid is also lines. It's less random, but no less line making. And in the center, I repeat rather quickly but deliberately with single strand of green silk, this swath of green, which kind of represents grass and is scribbled into this split level piece. So that I not defend, but I bring textiles to scribbling. So let's keep going.
Thank you so much, Stacy. It's wonderful to see the extension into other materials, and stitching is fabulous. So many works in the show are with that. All right, one last slide is a contemporary artist. As I was looking around on the weekend, putting together this little show, I saw some art that was in the galleries right now. This just finished on the Dutton Gallery, and it's a scribbler. It's Larston Avery. I found it fascinating. It was sculptural, and it really showed scribbling. And it's there. It's around. It's official. Scribbling is good.
Yes.
This artwork is by Madeline Farr. We actually used her artwork. It'll come up later, but we used it for our title banner. It was a lot of fun. And the show is at the Great Hall. The physical show to see it is at the Great Hall at First Presbyterian Church of New York City. And it's at 12th Street and 5th Avenue. I can put information in the chat later on. So our first artist will talk. Here's a list of our artists. We had about 34 artists in the show. And I want to say thank you to everybody. And the first artist who will speak is Sarah Hauser. Sarah?
Okay, so I just wanted to quickly say that I think it was really interesting what Joyce brought up in the beginning about being in the moment when you're making art. And in addition to being a visual artist, I also work with animals, with energy work, different modalities. And so being in the moment with the animal or being in the moment while making art at all it's a very important concept to me. So thank you. All right, so next, cats are always in motion, and I wanted to see what would happen if I tried to draw their shape and their energy with wire. So I started out with a series of wire sculptures. And then when I heard about the scribbles call for entry, I thought, well, what if that energy and feeling of the wire was transferred to a flat surface? So I got a big pad of paper and a pen, and I just started to experiment, and I ended up filling up the whole pad of paper with drawings. And this drawing in the show is one of those drawings. And so now I'm kind of inspired to go back to making some sculptures, maybe in a larger size, and also interested in further exploration with the drawings as well. And I also wanted to say that a lot of the energy and inspiration for both the sculptures and drawings come from Calder, who did such incredible things with his wire sculpture with such a whimsical energy that really resonates with me. So thank you. I'm really pleased to be in the show.
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. That was great. And speaking of Calder, we have here a sculptural, visual, three-dimensional scribble by Robin Glassman. I want to thank John Berman and her husband. Robin has been a member of the Artist Circle, and she passed away a few years ago. And her husband keeps her memory alive, and Robin participates in some shows, and she has a page on a portfolio on our website. So I want to thank John. And in this case,
Lois,
yeah.
I want to add also that he told me that the sales are donated to a group that works with cancer patients.
That's great. And thank you so much, Joyce. You know, many of the works are for sale. Many are reasonably priced. So if you have friends or you come by, please look at that as well. In this case, Robin uses natural materials, and it has an ephemeral nature to use the balancing of the objects, just as Calder did in his mobile. And Robin also said that the objects of nature cast shadows, and the shadows were just as much a scribble as the actual material is as well. And there's a delicacy of the balance as she uses these forms to create a three-dimensional scribble.
I think also, if you don't mind me chiming in,
Please do.
with Calder, when he first started to make his movable art, it was run by, a mechanism which was predictable. And then when he moved to the mobile, he liked the idea that it was somewhat unpredictable how the air flowed and moved the mobile in an imperceptible, very, very slow motion. So I think this piece and another theme in this idea of scribbles is this idea of the play between something that's planned and random. Just a
Exactly.
thought.
Yeah. And it's in a beautiful place in the exhibition. So next, I wanted to talk about Diane Churchill. And this piece is in our online show, but she unfortunately has had COVID and could not bring the piece to the show. But we want to honor the piece and just talk about it for a moment. This piece is entitled Page from a Lost Book. And what we have is a semic writing on this very colorful background of metallic paint and ink. And a semic writing is very primitive in feeling. It's nonsense, but it has the sense of verve and joy, and it puts together a sense of humor in work that we see here. And this is an ode to books, an ode to a lost book. So thank you, Diane. The next piece is by Carol Paik, and it's another example of our fabric work. This shows stitchery, stitching, and embroidery. And as I said, it's a frequent material in the show. The partial contour drawings have unfinished qualities, and the two different views have a feeling of a searching quality. There's a humorous feeling to this, and I just love the sense of play about it, and the sense of mimicry of line, writing, and expression mold into one. It's unusual material, I feel.
I think it's also really interesting the contrast between the idea of a spontaneous line and yet it's stitched, which is so slow and so unspontaneous in a sense. And it has like these two opposite things juxtaposed.
Yeah, it's a wonderful contrast. Let me go to the next one. This one is by January Yoon Cho, and it's a line drawing, and it has a sense of scribbling to it, and it's almost like a real scene. It's got bees as pollinators with the cranberry bog, And January is a performance artist as well. This is part of her performance at a Cranberry Bog. And she had planned to have this on top of a photograph, but after weeks of repeatedly creating and erasing elements, she chose to preserve minimal drawings with the photograph within the photograph and fully developed a standalone version of this pollinators. There's a sense of randomness with her markings, and though it's also blending a figurative motif. And this one, the next one is by Bonnie Epstein, and I'd like Bonnie to speak about it. Is Bonnie here?
I'm here. I'm
Okay.
here.
Thank you. Bonnie.
Hi. I scribble with line, texture, shadow, and unusual combinations of materials. And in this piece, it's muslin, cotton muslin, rat wire, sequins, and hand embroidered cross stitch. I like the scribbling appeal of unusual materials like wire, combined with what people think of as prim hand-stitched cross stitches.
Well, it has a very wonderful kind of serendipitous feeling, and that how you have 4 different versions with the simple materials and a very small piece of fabric. So thank you so much. It's really nicely done. Our next artist is Stacy Bogdanoff. If she could just talk about this piece as well. Thank you, Stacy.
It's similar to the one that I referred to earlier with the green. This has that overlapped swath in the middle, and we'd have to zoom in, but all of that dark center is stretch line is composed of overlapping stitches, overlapped, scribbled, spontaneous, and cross-hatched with no deliberate pattern. In this case, it's a spool. I used a spool of wonderful industrial electrical wire that was wrapped with almost a grosgrain thread type ribbon. And we haven't talked a lot about how the pleasure of the process that we all get with scribbling, just the motion that we hold in our hands and our bodies, and how natural an extension it is. And that also feels the same way when I stitch. So the pop of the needle pulling through taut linen and making a mark and a line and a mark and a line. And that is why this piece can hang out with scribbles. That's it.
Thank you. That's terrific. The next artist is Stacy, Darcy. Darcy, are you there?
This is an 11 by 14-inch graphite drawing, and it's titled Clusters. The meaning of the work is intentionally open to interpretation by the viewer, and all of my intricate work begins as an almost random line without thought. Then I react to it in a nonverbal way, allowing the image to emerge from my unconscious mind. And drawing for me is a meditation. And I do feel like the chattery part of my mind is occupied somewhere else when I'm working, and I have this wonderful flow that comes from some mysterious place.
Thank you. It has a beautiful texture quality to it. Thank you. The next artist is Lynn Friedman. The art is called Meander in the Spring Air. This is kind of a merging and melding of house and garden. And it's kind of a construction of organic scribblings that become very textural. It's the mark as texture. And it's a little obsessive compulsive, which sometimes the joy of scribbling means it's never ending. And it's a beautiful piece in the show. It's very large, and it strikes you in watching the merging together of the 2 aspects of the subject, the nature and the house. So thank you. That's a wonderful piece. The next artist is Paula Heisen, who treats a house and garden a little differently. Let's hear about your work. Thank you, Paula.
Okay, I do these small drawings as preparation for larger paintings. They're about 7 by 9 inches. I work on site and I draw directly from nature. I spend a lot of time walking around my town in the Catskills, photographing things that interest me, and I return to the ones that haunt me. By the time I return to the motif, I have a clear idea of what I want. Still, each drawing is a surprise. The drunken cross-hatchings slowly accumulate into something approximating my vision. Everything I draw suggests its own type of mark, so all my drawings are very different in the markings. It's as though the landscape itself dictates how it will be drawn. In Gray House, the towering weeds of an unkempt yard on my Catskill street frame the meticulously maintained house next door, suggesting the certainty of nature's last word. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. In this artist, this is Alyssa Decker, and there's a repetition and motion of marks as transitions. It's indigo ink. The title is Curse of Indigo, and it has a fast-paced, rhythmic mark-like hooks, which define this work where the ball of marks appears to be moving. It has an ambiguity. Is it living? Is it animal? Where is it moving to? What direction? What is it actually? And that has a sense of subversive quality in its confusion about what it is. And I find it humorous, and it's spurring curiosity, which is a wonderful quality of scribbles. She has another piece in the show, which is a found scribble on a conch shell, which is a gorgeous pattern that seems like scribbling. Okay. This next work is by Ellen Grossman, and this work is about the physicality of making a scribble. There are accumulated lines and time notations at the beginning of her making the line, at the end of her making the line. It has a punching in clock feeling of notations. It has the date and time notations at the front end to stimulate the viewer to imagine the process of the hand guiding the pen on the paper for the individual buildup of each line, plus an accumulation of time of each line, and then the total time the drawing takes. And there's a grouping of parallel lines that are all in a scribbled formation. But then suddenly in the middle, she has a chaotic grouping of lines exploding out of this shape. And there's a sense of a textile in this form. But the fact that she was incorporating the notion of the duration of time it takes to make a scribble is a fascinating concept in this piece. Our next artist is Emily Burnett, and Emily is here. So I want to thank Emily.
Sure. So I've been doing drawings of natural objects, large scale like this one, which is about probably 30 inches high, and also smaller etchings. And that's my way of understanding and enjoying the forms of these objects. In this case, the swirling lines around the shell emerged from drawing the kind of twisting shapes that are revealed inside, rather than the other way around, the shell emerging from scribbles. At the time I was drawing this, I was drawing in the moment, but looking back, like in Joyce's introduction when she quoted Picasso, you look back and you sort of see your intention, which I think was to accentuate that sense of spiraling movement and make it more tangible. So in Lois's introduction, I really enjoyed the scope of the artists she noted who used scribbling in their work. I just wanted to add Rembrandt to that, and also Jim Dine. And a shout out to, I found a special joy in the scribbling lines of Henry Moore's Sheep Sketchbook, which is an amazing book, and I recommend to anybody who's not familiar with it.
Thank you so much, Emily. And I enjoyed in your commentary about the phrase a system of expression. I found that scribbles can form a whole cloth idea. Okay. This is Fran Beeler, and Fran is giving us a drawing of a person on Yupo paper of a face on top of a sheet of scribbles. And she notes that she has the sheer love of direct application and the immediacy of scribbling. And she forms a textural surface with the transparency of a sheet of paper above it. It's kind of interesting. There's a mystery about this person, and it's a target on the person. So the clearer drawing of a face emerges from a field of scribbling in sharp contrast. Thank you, Fran. And this is my artwork. I did this piece several times to try to find a way to find the fluidity of line. And what I like about the idea of scribbling is cartooning, which I didn't pay much attention to, though I love it. I didn't put it in my work very much, but it's the whole idea of where we get ideas. And I felt like scribbling like acrobats leaving your hand. I've also been fascinated by the hot air balloon innovation in France and the idea of fantasy and whimsy and the imagination. And so this became an idea of a person, an artist, creating scribbles coming out of their hand. And Maria Mima Scarpini is fascinating. Her work is done here on a braille, sheet of braille. And the texture of braille embossed paper and the orderliness and neatness of braille is contrasted with the markings of erasure and the explosive marks of a radiating ball of gray marks. There's a mystery and beauty of braille embossed paper, inspiring the idea of writing and language. And here, there's a sense of noting censorship and afterthoughts by the markings on top of the braille sheet. And she notes that there's fingerprints and erasure and blocking on top of the braille, and a sense of process here, fingerprint engagement going on. So I found it very interesting to use braille in this work. In the next work, Stephen Cox is showing us a gestural line as a subset of scribbles. And he has different types of marks. In the upper portion, there are small marks that are very dense, and the lower portion, the blue markings, are a little more open and freer. And the textual explorations of marks is strong, and their contrasts show in the Rothko-esque rectangles. And they're a stylized form of expression. And here the marks as a technique are the star. Kathy O'Keefe, and Kathy is showing us an exploration that follows in the footsteps of Jackson Pollock's idea of throwing the paint and finding the design and pattern and control in where the marks are made. There's beautiful arcs of paint here, and it has a sense of joy and fun. Everyone should try this because it's beautiful, and it has a sense of freedom, joy in it. Our next speaker is Walter Brown, who would like to speak.
This past fall and up to the present, I have been doing a series of paintings to counter my terrible feeling about the way the world is going and how much I don't understand about the world. And I realized that to get down, to make any progress in understanding any of this, I had to really simplify down to the very basics. So for me, those basics were line, shape, and color. And in this piece, the only imposition on myself was that, kind of like the way Sol LeWitt would give directions for his work, was just to make the lines curve and going from one side to the other. So everything is kind of hooked up. And what I realized was that I had been doodling all along and scribbling all along, and just by using a different vocabulary, I was doing the same thing. But so it was really instructive for me to do this show with everybody.
Thank you very much, Walter. That is great. Thank you.
Sure.
In this case, we have Regina Silvers, who is a wonderful painter of outdoor scenery, and she is a landscapist, and she has a natural hand that does beautiful renderings and scribbling. Here is a very free rendition of nature of the mink hollow too, and her linear beginnings arrived as painted drawings. And there's a tremendous spontaneity in her line in responding to nature in plein air drawing, and it's on perfect display here with vibrant lines and shapes and white space. And the scribbling feels like chaotic freedom with a beautiful sense of nature. The next artist, Alice Harrison, has a dynamic collage. And the collage is almost like a scribbling in the whole sense of using shapes. And it's not just linear. What she's using here are themes of birds. And I find that the birds and the whole concept of the piece is a scribble. It's kind of like the whimsy and the fantasy comes through, not just the formation of the technique, but also in the choice of our subject. And so we have lines, but we have shapes, we have nature, we have birds. It's lovely. The next artist is Jody Fink, and the title is Looking for Words to Calm and Comfort. Perhaps it's done in particularly addressing what Walter was addressing, our troubled times. What she has here are variations in a grid. She has a scratched baking dish in the background. On top, we have tiles separated in a grid formation with white line random patterning on these tiles. The formalism of the grid balances the tossed, scribbled chaos. I feel that it's a very fun way to kind of watch the scratched tray mimic the white lines. So it's kind of a unity there. And she's holding it together with magnets. So it's a nice, fun piece. Thank you very much, Jody.
Yeah, I'm happy to be included in the show.
Oh, great. Thank you. Our next speaker is Joyce. Joyce, please talk about your work.
Thanks so much, Lois. Just a little backdrop to this type of art. Before I made this type of art, for many years, I made art about grief following the death of my brother when I was 19. And, there comes a point where, a human being, you find your joy again. And I really wanted my art to uplift and be playful and lighthearted. So this is just one example. I would say I have natural rhythm. Like I'm pretty good at music, I'm pretty good at dance, I'm pretty good at singing. And I kind of like a syncopated rhythm kind of feeling, a little jazzy. So this one I did when I was in the Bahamas and I just let the lines flow. And then some, but I like the rhythmic feeling to it, the way the shapes and the lines are repeated. And then sometimes I use these sketches for larger paintings, which I use this as a springboard for intricate patterns in larger paintings that are actually painted very slowly and methodically, sort of like with a graphic feeling. They're not painterly at all. But some of them start with these sketches. And just to bring it up to date, in 2025, well, I am not doing this right now. I have turned to making social justice posters. So I'm kind of usually responding to what's either going on within or in the larger world. And Lois, you're amazing. Everybody here is amazing. And I love all the variety. It's really inspiring. And of course, thank you to the other curators as well.
Well, thank you so much, Joyce. Well, I want to continue with our next artist, Lori, who's also a curator. So thank you, Lori.
Hi, everybody. Okay, so in my case, I think my scribbles are both intentional and unplanned, and I'm going to call this category controlled scribbling, much like, I guess, the intentions of Dubuffet and Pollock, sorry. All of my work begins really calculated, and I amass inspiration from photography of what we see in everyday life. So maybe we wouldn't consider this the definition of scribble per se, but at the moment I seem to be a print artist and I'm at the mercy of the printing press, and trying to control the printing press is like trying to control waves on a beach. So in my context, it's the end product that's the spontaneous scribble, which is dictated by the medium that generates the organic patterns, textures, zigzags that you see here. And because one can't fully control the outputs of the inks and the rollers, artists are forced to relinquish control each time the paper goes through the press, and as the process becomes more layered and more complex and loose. Um, I I eloquently entitled this piece called Hold 10 because it's the aerial view of the beautiful garbage bins that line the boardwalks of Jones Beach, which was actually the very happiest memories of my childhood. So this scribble is the entry, or Joyce, I'll use your word, springboard of studies when I apply to different mediums to complete the body of work.
Thank you so much, Lori. It's fascinating. I can relate as a printmaker. But I love the sense that there's scribbles within the details and that they come out. I mean, there's a sense of that back and forth in the printmaking. It's great. Thank you. Our next artist is Madeline Farr, who is the artist that we incorporated into the banner. So Madeline, it's your turn. Please go ahead.
Thank you. In this piece, my intent was to capture the energy and rhythm of human interaction through both scribbles and dynamic collage elements. Each figure emerges from a tangle of lines and textures, reflecting movement, connection, and the ever-changing nature of shared experiences. On this particular piece, I had printed on aluminum, so it's a limited edition in a few sizes. So, and I really thank you so much for honoring me by using it for the banner.
Oh, it's joyous and lots of fun. So scribbles are fun. It's great. Our next artist is Allie Berman. Go ahead, Allie.
Hi. So about 45 years ago, I went to Texas and I saw Cy Twombly's work and I fell in love. And I still see the scribbles. I still see the Fall of Hyperion. I still see Red. I still see so many of his works in my mind. And when Lois put this show together, I thought that I won't be able to do it. But she extended a thank you so much, and that gave me a few days, and I completed this work. And so this work, it's a form of asemic writing, and also it's the story of my life. I had 2 kids, I lost 2 kids. I have writing, if you look closely, you'll see the prime numbers, and prime numbers take away a little bit of the chaos in the world because they help a very chaotic world that we're going through now. But prime numbers represent a stable entity in that universe. And so I put the first 100 numbers in there. I also got into the materials, and I have chalk, I have scrapings, I have gold, I have markers, I have paints. It just was wonderful, and I really appreciate it. And thank you, Lois, and thank you, Paula, for doing the slideshow. Appreciate it. And the name of this is Dreams of Destiny, which I've always felt. Dreams are destiny. Yes, they are. Mm-hmm. And that was fun to do. Thank you.
Thanks. And this work is by Barbara Griffiths. Barbara has a sense of surreality to this. Mommy and Me sense a sense of motherhood and child. And here we have the kind of scrolls of a toddler, the child side. And we have Mom here with smeared lipstick kind of, and it's a realistic painted eye. So she's combining scribbling, primitive scribbling with this kind of image in the lower right, which is a calligraphic doodad of script, the perfect script from penmanship. So ornamental penmanship is very clever and requires skill and control. And of course, this is the opposite in the scrollings there as well. So it's kind of a combination. It's a contrast. And Barbara does this very well, the sense of polish and sloppiness. So thank you very much, Barbara. The next artist is Barbara Swanson Sherman. Barbara has a wonderful piece of a doodle of a collage and pen and ink. And she has a scribbled quality of tossing the elements. It's not just the line that's tossed and worked around, it's kind of the whole composition. And it's a tribute to Joseph Cornell's house on Utopia Parkway. And there's a deliberate interplay of the precise versus the random swishes and swirls. And it's, as a whole, a flight of fancy and filled with imagination. I think that's part of the ethos of scribbling, very imaginative. The next artist is Arcadia Carabella, and she has decided to talk. If you can unmute, please. Thank you, Arcadia.
Hi, my name is Arcadia Caraballo. I'm actually here at my job at Bronx Community College. So what you see here is the beautiful library here at Bronx Community College. I want to talk about my piece. I wear the pants in mi casa. I wear the pants in mi casa is a very quick drawing for me to make that I made from a model. This drawing is of Lefty Lucy. She is a model. It's the first time I drew from a live model on the computer because this was during COVID and everything got shut down and I was unable to go to a drawing class at Society of Illustrators and other drawing classes that are held throughout Manhattan. I currently host a drawing class now where I live in a Barrios Art Space, but that's another story. Anyway, this piece is of Lefty Lucy, and one of the things I admired about the outfit that she was wearing was the stripes on her pants. And I was able to capture her stripes with charcoal very quickly and very efficiently. I did study fashion illustration at FIT, and I was definitely influenced by Antonio, who was a fashion illustrator in Manhattan, and his fashion illustrations appeared in the New York Times, all over the place. So I was definitely influenced by Antonio. I wear the pants in mi casa is also talking about, kind of the dynamic going on in my home. My scribbles are very deliberate. And sometimes I just need to draw some lines to settle the lines running through my mind.
Well, thank you. It's a very vibrant, expressive lady.
Thank you.
The next artist is Jeffrey Stein. And Jeffrey gives us another model. We have a few different themes running through subject-wise, and here's another figure. And what he's doing from live model is just outlining the shades, the tonalities, the values of watching a model from the side view. And the notion of mark making is very free and bold. The show was organized by Paula in terms of this slideshow from light, delicate line to the larger, big, bolder, raw lines. And we have at the end of the show now the work that has larger, expressive lines. And this is a lovely work in sepia and bold work, actually, using bolder scribbling lines. And we wanted to show that contrast with the delicate work that we showed at the beginning. And I see has some red marks here on top, which are great. The next artist is Miriam Stern. Miriam shows us a painting, and it's called Open Pickle, number 11. For those of you who don't know, Miriam explains that a peckle or peckala in plural, is Yiddish, and they are bundles of stuff. And the stuff I thought of as scribbles, because all of us have bundles and bundles and bundles of stuff in our lives. The ideas of history and yearnings and accomplishments, embarrassments, failures, and things in our life, which are scribbles or stuff. And I see this landscape that she's giving. It's a still life, but I see her outlines of prospectively drawing more, painting more. But she outlines her stuff in the front. And there's a sense of scribble to it. The marks aren't as kind of scratchy and scrawny as some scribbles are, but you sense a sense of scribbling, of portraying all that stuff going on. So that's a nice, really nice piece about the concept of scribble. The next piece is Susan Griucci, and Susan is giving us her study it's called Dance. It's two artworks that are diptych vertically. And her piece has Japanese design with sumi ink brushes, which influence this piece. There's a feel-good playfulness. She spoke of the joy of making this in the process of it. And she studied Chinese calligraphy. And they're shown in the brushstrokes and ink movement. And in the very wide range of brushstrokes, very big and very little in scale combined, making interesting contrast. The next artwork is by Janet Morgan. Janet implied maybe she might want to speak. I can speak if she's not, which we see here this wonderful figure, and it's large. It's the largest piece in the show vertically. I think it might be about 8 feet tall. And in this piece, you have a sweeping, gestural, gigantic, rhythmic, and figurative marks of scribbles vibrating with this large, iconic female figure. She's dancing because I assume because she has 4 legs. I hope she's dancing. And there's tons of energy lines and swirls that entwine with the figure like a seductive dance. So it's very bold and large and very imaginative. So thank you so much, Janet. The next piece is by Cade Pemberton. And Cade is talking about a small sketch in her sketchbook. It was free on, and the marks and scribbles go every which way, jumping from place to place, too free to settle down. And this is a artwork that she uses the full color palette. And I really like that because in many cases we think of scribble or drawings as monochromatic, working with only one tool and one color. And here we have scribbles that denote a huge amount of expressiveness through color and line. The next piece is by Ann Stanner, and it's a spiral in clay. And we all know that the spiral is a very, very iconic, organic, natural form. And by doing this, it's sort of like a primal experience of a scribble. And it's on clay, it's a tile. And it's a simpler version of what we've done in the show. We wanted to show more complicated work, but this scribble really spoke very strongly to us. And it's very primal and iconic. Thank you so much, Anne. We have 3 pieces left, so let's go through them. And this is a piece by Ellen Alt called Liquid 04. And in Ellen's work, she writes that she loves the grace of calligraphy and the flow of dance. And they share a synergy with line and the exploration of gesture. And both disciplines, that's calligraphy and dance, train the body to create lines, calligraphers through ink and dancers through motion. And these marks translate motion onto plastic Yupo paper, and yet the paper resists the liquid ink, yielding scribbled, surprising random reactions. And she speaks about her work inspired by the fluidity of languages, alphabets, and movement. I guess the end result is a kind of mystery about how these processes come together. Next, we have Peggy Rolfe, and she has 2 pieces in the show. This one is more of the pink magenta one, and the other one is indigo. They were partners in a kind of a diptych. This is emotional color marks inspired from extreme weather and geological conditions. There's a fresh exuberance of mark making with dabs, dashes, and splatters. And it's almost as though the paint is the object. And this is a landscape from the mind's eye. Okay. And last but not least, we have Danielle Warren. And Danielle's color is great because it's a nice way to end our presentation with an exclamation point. The color is very vibrant and really reaches out to you. This piece has strong expressive color shapes, and there's a scribbled tossed quality. is both deliberate and free. It has a shout out quality, and there's a sense of motion, and it has a gestural quality that just says, here I am, and I'm here, I'm a scribble. And so I want to thank Danielle, and I want to now close the slideshow. Thank you, everybody. No, it was a joy to kind of see all the scribbles and how they came together. Everybody has their unique point of view, what they chose, their emotional inner life, the materials they choose, the expression and the focus they chose in the artwork. So it was fun to do. Thank you, everybody.
If you are in the New York area, invite friends to the reception, which is, when is the reception, Lois?
Our reception, the second reception will be April 13th, which is Sunday. It'll be noon to 4 p.m.
Okay, great. So we can also continue the discussion at that time if you're in the area. And I want to give a big, huge thank you to Lois Bender, our presenter and curator and amazing artist. And Lois has such a big heart. She has boundless energy to do this in such a, do this meaning, organize this exhibit in such a professional way. And this is such a great example of how art brings people together. Art creates community. Art creates joy. And we can never underestimate the power of art at a time like today. So thank you, Lois. Thank you, Stacy Bogdanoff and Lori Bennett-Levy, also for assisting, which you're also all both amazing. And what's the name of the person, excuse me, who did
Paula.
the video?
Paula.
The video is so beautiful and so professional and so elegant, and all the words you used, it was just spot on. So I also want to thank, of course, the Pollock Krasner House and Study Center, and hope that you'll come visit us in the spring or join our other Zoom programs. And if you'd like to see those programs, you can just email me, joyce@imaginearted.com. This talk will be posted on my YouTube channel after it's edited, and I'll also give Lois a copy. And after it's edited, you can feel free to share it with friends as well. Okay?
And I have to give a round of applause to everybody who participated. Round of
That's
applause.
right. And
Thank you.
absolutely, Allie. All of the artists who spoke and shared your art and participated in the exhibit, and all the depth and breadth of your creativity. It was a lot of fun. So I gotta go scribble. No,
Thank you very much, everyone.
Right. And take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.